In this video, we're going to take a look at some things that you can use to debug your program when you're working with Visual Studio and C#. Okay. Any program that you write that's not trivial is almost certain not to work the first time. And so a big part of programming is figuring out what mistakes you have made. And that process is called debugging, and we're going to look at some of the tools in Visual Studio that help make that process easier. Okay, so this is my two-dimensional arrays program that we used on the last video. And I am going to introduce, we'll do it up here in main. I'm going to introduce a syntax error. I'm going to get rid of the semicolon on the end of this line, which is required. And I do get a red wavy line there, but let's say that I don't see that red wavy line and I try to run the program. Let's click on Start. And I'll get this error messages, and you almost always say no to this because if you run the last successful build, you don't learn anything about the changes that you made. So choose no. And the error list window should pop up down below. And there are errors, which are red with a white X. There are warnings, which is yellow with a black exclamation mark. And then there are messages, which is blue with a white I in the middle. And these are in order of importance. You can't run your program if it has an error in it, so those are listed first. And down here, it will give you an error message. Sometimes these are good, sometimes they're kind of hard to figure out. But what it will also do is over here on the right side, it'll tell you what line that occurred on, and your program numbers or lines are numbered up here. So you can simply go to row 24 and try to figure that out. The row number where the error was identified is not always the row number where the error is. Sometimes it might be on the previous line, and Visual Studio doesn't find out that there's an error until it gets to the next line. But if it says line 24 here, you know for a fact that it cannot be anything beyond line 24, but it might be, a line or two above line 24. If you double click on the error line here, let's move the cursor someplace else. If you double click on the error line, it will take you to the line where the error occurred, and you can take a look at it, and hopefully when you look at it, you'll be able to figure out what the problem is. So we get here and we see we missed a semicolon, so we can just type it in. And when you do that, it gets rid of the error message. Okay. We had 0 warnings and 0 messages. Just going to add another variable up here that I don't need. And it looks like I don't even have to compile it. Down here I get a warning message. It's a warning because it's in yellow, not in red. It says I declared a variable but never used it. So that means, that either you decided not to use it and you just forgot to go back and delete it, or maybe you still do intend to use it, but you haven't used it yet. It could be an indication that there's something you're supposed to do in your program with that variable and you just forgot to do it. So the only way you really know is by looking at it. And again, it'll give you the line number over here, but if you just double click, let me move off of it so we can show the cursor move. If you double click on the error, it will take you, if you double click on the warning, it will take you to the line where where that warning originated. And you can try to figure out then what happened. Your program will still run if it has warnings in it, but it's a good idea, I think, to fix those error messages. So the easiest way to fix this one is just by deleting that row. So there you go. Another option for debugging is to set a breakpoint in a program. I'm going to set a breakpoint. We did this in a previous example, just a recent example. I'm going to set a breakpoint down here. You go to the line that you want to stop execution on. That's why they call it a breakpoint. And you click in the gray area over here on the far left. And when the program runs, it will get to that point and it will stop before it actually executes this instruction. So we know that everything above that has already been executed, but this line has not yet been executed. So let's go ahead and run that. And what we get is, after we've shown all the students and test scores, we get to the breakpoint here. This instruction has not yet been executed. If it had, the window would have gone away. But when you do a breakpoint, the nice thing about a breakpoint is you can pause your mouse over some of your variables and you can see what those variables are. So I pause my mouse over score. It's telling me that it is an array with 20 rows and 3 columns. But if I click on the little arrow here, it will actually show me the contents of that array, and it will give them to me in row order. So here is row 0, 3 columns. Here's row 1, here's row 2, all the way up to my last row in here is 19, and my last column is column 2. So if you set a breakpoint, it allows you to pause the program and take a look at the variables. If there's a problem with your program, what it almost always means is that you have some variable in your program that is getting assigned the wrong value. So what you need to do is you need to stop at a place where you think that error may have occurred and examine the variable. So if I examine the variable in question here and it has the value that I think it should have at this point, then I know that I need to look further down in my program. Once you set a breakpoint and your program stops, you have some other options. I'm going to turn this breakpoint off. Just go click on it. Let's stop the program though first. And when I turn the breakpoint off, it's just a toggle. Click on it if it's there and it will disappear. If it's not there and you click, it will appear. So let's go down to, we are doing initialize scores, and let's set a breakpoint right here on line 31, which is the inner for loop. Now let's go ahead and run it, and it stops right here. If I stop and examine, R is 0, C is, this hasn't actually been executed yet, but C is automatically initialized to 0 anyway. And what I want to do here is I just want to start executing the program, but I don't want to put another breakpoint in. I don't want to execute everything from now until the end of the program. I like to go one instruction at a time and see what's happening to my variables. And we have a debug menu up here, and two of the options are step over and step into. And these are similar, but step into, if it's a function call, you'll actually go into the function and see what's going on in the function. If it's a function call and you know that function works and you don't really want to go into it and step through it one instruction at a time, you can do a step over, which is F10. So F11 or F10, probably usually F10. If you want to stop in the middle of a function and check it out, put the breakpoint in the function, and then you can still do step over. Okay, so I'm going to click over here, and now I'm going to press F10 on my keyboard, and it, this is actually kind of treated like 3 statements. And then what I do is I execute this. I hit F10 again. I add 1 on to C. I check to see if it's less than test, and then I assign a new value, and I'm just going to hit F10 a few more times. It adds 1, checks to see if it's less than test, executes the body of the loop again, and so on. So you can execute one line at a time, and after you do each execution, you can look at the value of the variables that you may have questions about and see if something has gone wrong at that point in your program. So when you've stepped through the loop a few times, enough to figure out the answer to your question, you can take the breakpoint off and you can continue execution of your program. I've already stopped it here, but let's go back. Let's try that one more time. Let's put a breakpoint on line 31. Let's start it. When it comes to a stop here, I can do my single stepping. When I'm done with the single stepping, you can click on continue up here. And actually, if you're in a loop, it will do one body execution of the loop, and then it will stop again. And so this one's actually going to stop 20 times for me. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to turn the breakpoint off, and I'm going to tell it to continue. And now it will continue running the program all the way to the end. Okay, and that's probably a good place to quit for now.